He was just a butler accused of stealing by the billionaire. He served for years, dragged to court with no lawyer, no support, and no one willing to believe him until the billionaire's own daughter walked into the courtroom holding a folder and said 7 words that changed everything they thought they knew. Before we continue with this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Oh, and don't forget to comment below where you're watching us from. We'd love to know. That old man Albert had worked as a butler for the Langford family for many years. He was responsible for managing every corner of the big house, serving meals for the family, and keeping everything neat and organized. Old man Albert knew the routine of the house very well and followed it carefully. Over time, he formed a strong bond with Sophie, the young daughter of Victor Langford. Old man Albert treated Sophie with love and care, like a member of his own family. They would often spend time together, talking and laughing during quiet moments. Old man Albert had seen Sophie grow up and always looked out for her. The rest of the family, especially Beatrice, Victor's mother, treated old man Albert in a more distant way. Beatrice always acted cold toward him, never truly trusting him despite his years of work and loyalty. Old man Albert, however, remained polite and respectful. His job was important to him, and he did it with pride, even if he wasn't treated as part of the family by everyone. One day, something unexpected happened that changed everything. A valuable family jewel went missing from the mansion. It was a ring that had been passed down for generations and held great sentimental value to the family. As soon as the loss was discovered, panic and suspicion filled the air. Beatrice quickly pointed fingers at old man Albert, saying he was the only outsider in the house who had access to the room where the jewel had been kept. Old man Albert was shocked and confused. He had done nothing wrong and had no idea where the ring could be. But Beatrice didn't care. She spoke loudly, making sure everyone heard her accusations. Victor didn't know what to think. He hesitated, torn between his trust in old man Albert and the pressure from his mother, even though he had never had a problem with old man Albert before. He eventually gave in to Beatrice's demands. He approached old man Albert with a serious face and told him it was best that he left the house for now. Old man Albert felt his chest tighten, couldn't believe what was happening. After all the years he had worked for the family, this was how it ended. He tried to defend himself, explaining he would never steal anything, but no one seemed to listen. Soon after, the police were called. Officers arrived at the mansion and questioned him in front of the family. Old man Albert was taken to the police station as a suspect. At the station, he sat alone, scared and unsure of what would happen next. He had no lawyer to help him and no money to pay for legal support. The police asked him questions over and over again, but he had no answers to give. He was eventually released, but they told him he would have to appear in court. The process was not over. Old man Albert walked out of the station with a heavy heart, knowing that his life had just changed in a way he could not control. When old man Albert returned home, everything felt different. His small apartment, once a peaceful place, now felt cold and quiet. The word about the missing jewel and the accusations against him had already started to spread. It didn't take long for neighbors and people he knew to start avoiding him. Some whispered behind his back. Others stopped greeting him like they used to. The friendly smiles he often received on the street were gone. Old man Albert felt like an outsider in his own community. He rarely went outside, afraid of the looks people gave him. At the store, he noticed how people stepped away or ignored him completely. It was as if everyone had decided he was guilty, even though there was no proof. Old man Albert began to feel more and more alone. The trust he had built over the years with so many people disappeared in just a few days. He tried to stay strong, but it was hard. Meanwhile, he thought constantly about Sophie. The little girl had always been kind to him, and old man Albert missed their conversations and the bond they had. He wondered if Sophie believed the accusations too. That thought hurt him the most. Old man Albert had cared for Sophie like his own child. He hoped that Sophie at least remembered all the good times they had shared. But there was no way for old man Albert to know. No one from the Langford family reached out to him. They had turned their backs completely. Old man Albert kept thinking about the moment Victor asked him to leave. His voice was calm, but there was no kindness in it. He looked at him like a stranger, not someone who had been part of his household for years. Old man Albert didn't know if he truly believed he was guilty or if he was just afraid to go against his mother. Either way, his silence had hurt him deeply. Days turned into weeks. Old Man Albert stayed mostly inside, trying to keep himself busy with chores and routines, but his thoughts always went back to what happened. He wondered if the truth would ever come out, if the ring would be found, or if someone would realize the mistake. He didn't have the resources to investigate or clear his name. Everything felt out of reach. Old Man Albert tried to contact a few people he had trusted in the past, but most didn't want to get involved. The shame of being labeled a thief followed him everywhere. He avoided mirrors as if he didn't want to see the sadness in his own eyes. At night, he barely slept, replaying the events in his mind over and over again. Each morning, he hoped to wake up from what felt like a bad dream, but the reality remained. He had been accused without proof, rejected without a fair chance to explain, and left to face the consequences alone. Old Man Albert began to lose hope. His reputation was damaged, his job was gone, and his name was now tied to something he didn't do. He didn't know how to move forward. Court date was approaching, and he had no idea how to defend himself. He looked through old documents, pay slips, and even photos with the Langfords, trying to gather anything that might help his case. But there was little he could do without a lawyer. Every day felt like a new challenge. He no longer smiled, and he spoke less than before. Even small tasks became difficult. The strength and energy he once had seemed to be fading. Old Man Albert had always been a proud worker, someone who found value in his role. Now that part of him was taken away, his life had changed drastically, and not because of something he had done, but because of what people believed. He remained in his apartment, waiting for the next step, hoping for a chance to clear his name. Old Man Albert was still deeply affected by everything that had happened. He stayed at home most of the time, sitting quietly and thinking about the false accusation that had destroyed his life. He couldn't stop going over the events in his head. Nothing made sense. He kept asking himself why someone would blame him without proof, and why Victor, after so many years of trust, had done nothing to defend him. Old Man Albert missed his job, not just because of the money, but because it gave him purpose. He especially missed Sophie, the only person in that house who ever treated him like family. The silence in his apartment made him feel more alone than ever. Each morning, he hoped for a call, a message, anything that could help him understand the situation. But no one reached out. Old Man Albert felt forgotten. Still, he knew he couldn't give up. He needed answers. He needed to clear his name. Even if no one else believed in him, he had to find a way to prove his innocence. One afternoon, as he was folding laundry in his small living room, someone knocked on the door. Old Man Albert wasn't expecting anyone. He slowly opened the door and was surprised to see Sophie standing there alone. The little girl looked nervous but determined. Without saying a word, she walked in and hugged Old Man Albert tightly. Old Man Albert knelt down and held her for a long moment. Sophie told him she didn't believe what people were saying. She said she missed Old Man Albert every day and wanted things to go back to how they used to be. Then Sophie pulled out a drawing from her backpack, showed the two of them holding hands and smiling. Old Man Albert looked at the picture and tears filled his eyes. It was a simple drawing, but it meant everything to him. It gave him hope again. It reminded him that not everyone had turned against him. Sophie still believed in him, and that gave him the strength he needed to keep fighting. After Sophie left, Old Man Albert carefully placed the drawing on his table and sat beside it. For the first time in days, he felt like he had a reason to move forward. He knew he couldn't rely on luck. He had to act. Old Man Albert began gathering all the letters of recommendation he had received over the years. He searched through old boxes and found documents written by previous employers praising his honesty, his hard work, and his dedication. He also started writing down everything he remembered from the day the jewel disappeared. He listed what time he arrived, what tasks he did, and who he spoke to. Old Man Albert wanted to build a timeline to show that he had nothing to do with the missing ring. Every piece of information mattered. It was slow work, and sometimes he felt overwhelmed, but he kept going. The thought of Sophie and the drawing on the table reminded him that he was uncompletely alone and that he still had something worth fighting for. Realizing he would need legal help, Old Man Albert started looking for someone who could represent him. Most lawyers were too expensive, and some refused to get involved once they heard his name. One day, after many failed attempts, he walked into a small legal aid office and explained his situation to the receptionist. He waited nervously in the lobby until a young intern named David came out to speak with him. But he was kind and listened carefully. After hearing his story, David told him he wasn't a full lawyer yet, but he was willing to help him find support and prepare his case. He believed that what had happened to him was wrong. Old Man Albert was surprised by his kindness. Together, they started reviewing his documents and organizing everything. David helped him understand the legal steps ahead. He said it wouldn't be easy, but they would take it one step at a time. Old Man Albert finally felt like someone was on his side again. For the first time, he had hoped that he could defend himself properly. While Old Man Albert was quietly preparing his defense, Beatrice was doing the opposite. Determined to make sure Old Man Albert would be punished, she hired Harold Kensington, a famous lawyer known for winning difficult cases. Harold had a powerful reputation and a long history of success in court. With his help, Beatrice began building a strong case against Old Man Albert. She didn't stop there. She also contacted a few reporters and started sharing her version of the story. Soon, newspapers and websites were publishing headlines that made Old Man Albert look guilty. Articles described him as untrustworthy, and some even called him a thief without any proof. Old Man Albert saw the news and felt sick. The media had turned against him. The public believed what they read, and more people started treating him badly. Old Man Albert felt like his voice was getting smaller while Beatrice's lies grew louder. But he reminded himself that he wasn't alone now. David was helping him, and Sophie still believed in him, and that gave him strength to keep going. Victor, meanwhile, stayed quiet through everything. He didn't speak to the press, and he didn't visit Old Man Albert. He spent most of his time at the mansion watching the news and listening to his mother. Beatrice was confident and proud of the way things were going, but Victor looked troubled. Deep down, he remembered all the years Old Man Albert had worked for the family. He remembered how kind he had been to Sophie, how reliable he was, and how he had always done his job with care. But he also didn't want to go against his mother, who was determined to see Old Man Albert punished. Victor found himself stuck in the middle, unsure of what to believe. The pressure from his mother was strong, and his silence made it seem like he agreed with her. But in his heart, Victor wasn't certain anymore. He kept thinking about Old Man Albert's face when he told him to leave. That moment haunted him. Still, he said nothing. And while he remained silent, the attacks on Old Man Albert continued. Sophie still missed Old Man Albert every single day. Ever since Old Man Albert left the house, the atmosphere at home had changed. Things felt quiet, but not in a peaceful way. Sophie noticed that no one mentioned Old Man Albert anymore. When she asked her father or grandmother about him, they avoided the question or changed the subject. One time she asked Beatrice directly, and Beatrice said that Old Man Albert had made a serious mistake and couldn't come back. Sophie didn't understand what mistake it was, and Beatrice never explained more. Sophie felt confused. Old Man Albert had always been kind and careful. She couldn't believe Old Man Albert had done anything bad, but since no one talked about it, she stopped asking. At night, Sophie would lie in bed thinking about Old Man Albert. She missed the way Old Man Albert used to help her with homework, the way he told simple stories while folding laundry, and how he always had time to listen. The house didn't feel the same without him, and Sophie didn't know why everyone pretended he had never been there. Meanwhile, Old Man Albert was still trying to prove his innocence. During his review of the day the jewel disappeared, he remembered something important. There was a security camera in the hallway near the room where the jewel had been kept. That camera should have captured anyone going in or out around the time the item went missing. With David's help, he requested the footage. After some delay, they received a report saying that the camera had been turned off at the exact time the theft supposedly happened. Old Man Albert was stunned. It seemed too convenient. He believed this detail could help his case. He shared the information with the court, hoping it would raise doubts about the investigation. But the response was disappointing. The court said that unless they had proof of who turned the camera off, the information was not useful. Old Man Albert felt frustrated. He thought this discovery would finally shift things in his favor. Instead, it was dismissed as unimportant. He realized that proving his innocence would be harder than he had thought. Beatrice continued working behind the scenes to keep the situation under control. She didn't want anyone in the family or the media to start questioning her version of events. When she heard about the camera being off, she made calls to speed up the court process. She wanted the trial to happen as soon as possible, believing that a fast result would prevent unwanted attention. At the same time, Beatrice started spreading rumors about Old Man Albert's past. She told people that Old Man Albert had financial problems and had borrowed money from others before. These stories, even without any real proof, began to spread quickly. People who had once supported Old Man Albert now kept their distance. Longtime friends stopped calling. Some didn't reply to his messages. Others said they were too busy to meet. Old Man Albert could feel people pulling away from him. His name had become associated with suspicion and scandal. He hadn't done anything wrong, but it felt like the world had already decided he was guilty. Old Man Albert also was, in getting the help he needed from the public defender assigned to his case. He was polite, but distant. He rarely called him and only met with him a few times. When they did talk, the meetings were short. He didn't seem interested in his story or the details he had carefully collected with David. Old Man Albert tried to explain his side and mentioned the camera issue again, but the lawyer said it was not strong enough. He seemed more focused on finishing the case quickly than fighting for him. Old Man Albert didn't know what to do. He didn't have the money to hire someone else. David, although supportive, was still only an intern and couldn't represent him in court. Old Man Albert felt like his case wasn't being taken seriously. The people who should be helping him weren't listening. Time was running out, and every day he felt more helpless. No one seemed to care that his entire life had been turned upside down for something he didn't do. Back at the Langford house, Sophie quietly continued to think about Old Man Albert. She didn't talk about it anymore because it made the adults upset, but she hadn't forgotten. One day she drew another picture for Old Man Albert. This time she drew them sitting together on the couch like they used to after school. She hid the drawing in her desk drawer, afraid someone might throw it away. Sophie was still young, but she noticed that things in the house felt different now. Her father didn't smile as much. Beatrice was more serious than usual, always on the phone or reading papers. Even the house staff acted more careful, like they were afraid of doing something wrong. Sophie could sense that people were upset, but no one explained anything. She kept waiting for someone to tell her what really happened, but no one ever did. The silence made her feel strange, like there was a big secret that only she didn't know. Still, she held on to the drawing for Old Man Albert. As the court date grew closer, Old Man Albert felt a heavy pressure building every day. The days felt longer, and the nights were restless. He stayed inside most of the time, afraid to face people on the street. Even at the store, he noticed people staring or whispering. The fear of losing everything was growing inside him. He had worked for years to build a stable life. Now his name was connected to a crime and he couldn't find a way to clear it. He had no support from old friends and his assigned lawyer barely communicated with him. David tried his best to keep him hopeful, but Old Man Albert could see he was also frustrated. The court hearing was now just a few days away. Old Man Albert looked at the small pile of papers and documents he had collected. It didn't feel like enough. He sat by the window and stared outside, feeling the weight of everything. As the hearing approached, he felt more alone than ever before. On the day of the trial, Old Man Albert woke up early. His hands shook a little as he got dressed. He didn't have many clothes to choose from. The only formal piece he owned was his old work uniform, the same one he used to wear every day in the Langford household. It was clean and ironed, though slightly worn at the edges. Still, it was all he had. He placed his gathered documents, letters of recommendation, work records, and notes into a plain folder and took a deep breath before leaving his small apartment. When he arrived at the courthouse, he felt out of place. People walked around in expensive suits, whispering and checking their phones. He stood alone, holding his folder close. Inside the courtroom, he sat in the front, quiet and nervous, waiting for his name to be called. He saw familiar faces, but received no friendly looks. Everyone seemed distant. Old Man Albert lowered his eyes, preparing himself for what was to come. He knew this would not be easy. When the hearing began, the prosecutor, who had been hired by Beatrice, walked confidently to the center of the courtroom. His voice was clear and firm. He began by saying that Old Man Albert had betrayed the trust of the Langford family. He accused him of using his position in the household to gain access to the family's valuables. He said he was the only outsider in the house, and therefore the only logical suspect. He pointed out that Old Man Albert had been present on the day the jewel went missing, and described how he had access to the rooms in the house, including the one where the jewel had been kept. Then, one by one, a few witnesses were brought in. They were former employees and neighbors, some of whom mentioned they had seen Old Man Albert walking around the house during his shifts. None of them had real proof, but their words helped shape the image the prosecutor wanted. Old Man Albert listened quietly. No one seemed interested in his side of the story. Victor sat at the back of the courtroom. He didn't speak, and he didn't look in Old Man Albert's direction. His face was serious, almost blank, like he was trying to stay out of everything. Old Man Albert tried not to look at him too much, but he noticed his silence. It hurt. He had worked for him for so many years. He'd cared for his daughter and treated the house like it was his responsibility, yet now he wouldn't even meet his eyes. Beatrice, on the other hand, looked calm and confident. She whispered things to her lawyer every now and then, sometimes giving small nods or raising an eyebrow. It was clear she felt in control. She barely glanced at Old Man Albert as if she was sure the outcome was already decided. The way Beatrice sat, spoke, and behaved made it obvious that she had been preparing for this moment and believed everything was going according to her plan. Sophie was there too, sitting quietly in the audience beside her nanny. She looked small and confused, her feet barely touching the floor. She watched everything carefully but didn't speak. She wasn't allowed to. Once she didn't understand all the words being used, but she understood enough to know that something unfair was happening. She kept looking at Old Man Albert, trying to catch his eye. Old Man Albert saw her, but couldn't smile or wave. Courtroom rules didn't allow it. Sophie held a folded paper in her hand, likely another drawing, but she didn't move. The nanny beside her kept her still. No one asked Sophie anything, and she couldn't say what she knew or how she felt. She was just there to watch, unable to help. Old Man Albert wanted to reach out to her, to tell her everything would be okay, but he couldn't. Seeing Sophie in the courtroom made everything harder. It reminded Old Man Albert of what he had lost. It's not just a job, but someone he truly cared about. Then it was Old Man Albert's turn to speak. He stood up slowly and walked to the center. He held his documents tightly and looked out at the room. He started talking about his years of work at the Langford house. He explained how he took care of the managing, the serving, and everything else. He told them how much he cared for Sophie and how he had been there to support the family through good and bad times. His voice shook a little, but he stayed steady. He said he had never stolen anything in his life and didn't know what happened to the missing jewel. He talked about his routine that day and how he had already shared everything with the police. As he spoke, he looked around the room. No one showed any emotion. The judge remained neutral. The lawyers looked bored. Victor stayed quiet, didn't react. Old Man Albert's words didn't seem to matter. He told the truth, but the truth didn't seem to be enough. The trial continued with more formal questions and discussions between the lawyers. Most of it was technical, filled with terms Old Man Albert didn't fully understand. People looked at him, but not with kindness. Some stared with suspicion, others didn't seem to care at all. It was like he was already judged before he had even walked in. Every time a question was asked about his character, Old Man Albert felt like he was being attacked. His years of loyalty, his hard work, his dedication to the Langford family, none of it seemed to count. He kept glancing at Sophie, the only person who might still believe in him, but there was nothing the girl could do. The atmosphere was heavy. No one spoke up in Old Man Albert's defense. Even the public defender said only what was required without emotion. Old Man Albert felt like he was watching his life fall apart while no one did anything to stop it. He had come hoping someone would listen, but all he received were silent stares and empty faces. By the end of the day, Old Man Albert returned to his seat and sat down slowly. His folder of documents rested on his lap. He looked down at them, unsure if they had made any difference at all. Around him, the courtroom started to empty as the session ended. Beatrice walked out calmly with her lawyer, whispering again, looking satisfied. Victor followed behind them, still without saying a word. Sophie was guided out by her nanny, holding the same paper in her hand. Old Man Albert watched them go, still sitting alone, wearing the only formal clothes he had, his old uniform. Felt tired, not just from the long day, but from everything he had been through. No one had stood up for him. No one had defended his name. The trial was not over, but he could already feel the weight of how it had gone. He stayed in his seat for a moment longer, clutching his documents, trying to find the strength to stand up and walk away. New details started to appear, little by little, but nothing was clear enough to change Old Man Albert's situation. One day during a conversation in the courthouse hallway, a younger staff member who had once worked for the Langford, said something unexpected. She mentioned that on the night the jewel went missing, she had seen Beatrice walking alone near the room where the jewelry was kept. This was unusual because Beatrice normally didn't go upstairs alone, especially at night. Old Man Albert and David listened carefully, thinking this could be useful. But only a few hours later, the same woman changed her story. She said she wasn't sure anymore, and maybe she had seen someone else. It was clear she was afraid. Old Man Albert didn't blame her. He knew how much influence Beatrice had. That same week, the head housekeeper, who had worked at the Langford house longer than anyone else, was suddenly fired. When David tried to contact her for a statement, she refused to talk. Everyone was afraid. Old Man Albert felt stuck again without support. Old Man Albert didn't give up. He kept trying to understand the little pieces of information that came his way. He wrote everything down. Every conversation, every strange detail, every name mentioned. He believed that there had to be a truth hidden somewhere. But no matter how hard he looked, he felt like no one truly wanted to help him find it. People avoided his calls. Some even pretended not to know him anymore. Every small lead seemed to disappear before it could become useful. David did what he could, but his power was limited. Old Man Albert asked him if they could officially request more surveillance information, but the court had already denied his earlier request, saying the camera footage wasn't enough. He felt like every door was closing. Old Man Albert began to feel the same frustration every day. He had no way to fight back properly. He believed in his innocence, but it felt like that wasn't enough anymore. Everything depended on people who either stayed quiet or chose not to get involved. At the Langford house, Sophie noticed the tension growing. She didn't understand everything, but she could tell something was wrong. One night, she sat with her father and tried to talk to him. She remembered something from the night the jewel disappeared, something small, but maybe important. She told Victor she had seen someone near the jewelry room, and that she didn't think it was Old Man Albert. But Victor wasn't really paying attention. He nodded vaguely, his eyes focused on his laptop. He didn't ask questions or encourage her to say more. Sophie tried again, but he told her he was busy and would talk later. Frustrated and confused. She thought she was helping, but it seemed like no one wanted to hear what she had to say. The moment passed, and the memory she had stayed with her unspoken. Sophie sat quietly, wondering if she had done the right thing. She didn't know if what she saw mattered, but she knew she had tried to speak. Beatrice noticed Sophie asking more questions and acting differently. She began to pay closer attention to her granddaughter's behavior. Beatrice didn't like that Sophie was trying to talk about Old Man Albert. She believed the matter was closed and didn't want the girl getting involved or confused. To distract Sophie, Beatrice started buying her new toys, dresses, and even promised a trip. At first, Sophie enjoyed the attention, but she still brought up Old Man Albert in conversations. One afternoon, after Sophie asked again about the night of the jewel's disappearance, Beatrice became angry. She told Sophie to stop talking about the subject and warned her that if she continued asking questions, she might be sent to a boarding school far away. Sophie froze. She had never heard her grandmother speak like that before. From that moment on, she stayed quiet. She kept her thoughts to herself and stopped asking questions. Beatrice seemed pleased with the silence, but Sophie was now scared and confused. She didn't understand why something so simple was so dangerous to talk about. While all this was happening in the house, Victor spent more and more time alone in his study. He had started going through old family files trying to find peace or maybe just a distraction. One evening, while looking through the computer archives, he came across some old video recordings stored from the house security system. Most were daily footage of routine events. But in one video, he saw something that made him pause. It was from a few years earlier, Old Man Albert comforting Sophie after her mother had passed away. In the video, Old Man Albert sat on the couch with Sophie wrapped in a blanket, gently talking to her and wiping her tears. Victor watched silently. He had forgotten how much Old Man Albert had supported the family, especially during the hardest moments. That memory hit him hard. He started to remember how loyal and kind he had always been. It made him feel uncertain about everything. For the first time, he seriously started to question the way he had treated him. But he still didn't act. The days continued, but something inside Victor had changed. Even though he hadn't said anything out loud, he began to view everything differently. He noticed Beatrice's controlling behavior more clearly. He saw how Sophie had become quieter and more nervous. Couldn't stop thinking about that video of Old Man Albert and Sophie. It replayed in his mind, especially at night. He also started to wonder about the camera that had been turned off. Who had access to it? Who had a reason to make it stop working? The more he thought about it, the more questions he had. But still, he said nothing. He hadn't spoken to Old Man Albert since the day he told him to leave. He felt guilty, but he didn't know how to fix things, didn't know what side he was truly on. And so, while Old Man Albert kept fighting and Sophie stayed quiet under pressure, Victor sat with his thoughts, slowly beginning to see that the truth was much more complicated than he had once believed. Sophia was a young lawyer who had been following Old Man Albert's case through news reports and articles online. She didn't have years of experience or a big law office behind her, but something about the way Old Man Albert was being treated didn't sit right with her. She had read the headlines, watched some of the footage from the trial, and even followed public discussions on social media. The more she read, the more the case seemed strange. It felt rushed, incomplete, and biased. One afternoon, Sophia made the decision to reach out. She found Old Man Albert's address through court records and visited his small apartment. When Old Man Albert opened the door, he looked tired and unsure. Sophia introduced herself politely and explained that she wanted to help, even though she was still new in her career. She didn't expect Old Man Albert to trust her right away, but to her surprise, Old Man Albert nodded slowly and said yes. At that point, Old Man Albert had nothing left to lose and decided to let Sophia take a look. Sophia began by reading through all the documents Old Man Albert and David had put together. She spread them out on the table, organizing them by type, witness statements, timeline notes, letters of recommendation, and court papers. She read every word carefully, highlighting names, dates, and anything that didn't make sense. As she reviewed the material, she noticed several contradictions. One witness had said Old Man Albert was managing the hallway at a certain time, while another claimed he was already outside by then. A third mentioned hearing a loud noise but didn't say what it was. None of the statements fully matched, and the police report seemed rushed. Sophia pointed these things out to Old Man Albert and asked if they had ever been challenged in court. His public defender never looked into the details deeply. Encouraged by this discovery, Sophia decided to keep digging. She believed that if these small cracks were exposed properly, they could start to change the direction of the case. A few days later, while reviewing more notes and searching online, Sophia received a message from someone who claimed to know a secret about the missing jewel. The message came through social media and was short. The person said they had seen Beatrice wearing the jewel at a charity event 2 weeks after the reported theft. Sophia was surprised. She asked for proof, and the person sent a photo that had been posted online during the event. In the picture, Beatrice was dressed formally, and there on her hand was a ring that looked just like the missing jewel. Sophia saved the image and quickly began checking the event's details, location, date, and guest list. Everything matched. But when she tried to access the photo again an hour later, it was gone. The post had been deleted and the account had been made private. She had saved the image, but it wasn't clear enough to be used as legal evidence. Still, Sophia felt that she was getting closer to the truth. That evening, Sophia visited Old Man Albert and showed him what she had found. She explained how the picture matched the description of the missing item and that it was taken after the date of the supposed theft. Old Man Albert looked at the image for a few seconds and then nodded. He didn't seem surprised, Old Man Albert said. He always had a feeling something wasn't right. Beatrice had always acted too confident, too quick to point fingers. Old Man Albert believed that Beatrice had more control over the situation than anyone else. Sophia asked him if he ever thought Beatrice might have set the whole thing up. Old Man Albert didn't want to say it directly, but his eyes said enough. Sophia told him not to lose hope. She promised to keep looking for more evidence. Old Man Albert thanked her and said he was grateful, not just for the legal help, but because someone finally believed him enough to fight back. For the first time in weeks, Old Man Albert felt like he had someone truly on his side. While Sophia worked on the case, Sophie stayed quiet at home. She thought often about the night the jewel went missing. Certain images came back to her, voices in the hallway, a door creaking, her grandmother moving quickly through the upstairs area. She didn't understand everything she saw, but she knew something wasn't right. Still, she didn't say a word. The last time she had tried to talk about it, Beatrice had warned her to stop. Since then, Beatrice had become even more controlling. She watched Sophie closely, checked her notebooks, limited her screen time, and asked many questions about her conversations. She also tried to distract her with new gifts and special meals, but Sophie knew what was happening. She kept her thoughts to herself, drawing pictures and writing small notes that she hid inside her toy chest. She didn't want to forget what she had seen. She didn't trust anyone to tell just yet, not even her father. So, she remained silent even though her heart was full of questions. Sophia continued her investigation and decided to visit the courthouse in person. She requested access to the official records from Old Man Albert's case and spent hours in the archive room going through folders and files. As she read, she noticed more problems. Some statements were missing pages. Certain reports were not signed properly. The timeline didn't have full confirmation of key events. There were also gaps in how the evidence had been handled. One document even referred to a photo that wasn't attached. Everything marked all the inconsistencies. The more she read, the clearer it became that the case had been handled too quickly. It seemed like the system had pushed everything forward without asking enough questions. Maybe Beatrice's influence had helped rush the process. Sophia wasn't sure, but she had seen enough to know something was wrong. She called Old Man Albert and told him what she found. Then she sat down at home and began outlining a plan. She didn't know where it would lead, but she was ready. To investigate on her own? Sophia kept going through the files and timelines, reading each page more than once. The more she studied the case, the more inconsistencies she noticed. Official reports had details that didn't match. Some documents had timestamps that conflicted with what witnesses had said. For example, the time when Old Man Albert was said to be near the jewelry room didn't match the official serving schedule he had followed for years. Sophia also found that several parts of Old Man Albert's original statement were completely ignored or left out of the court records. Old Man Albert had mentioned specific things like the exact time he left the upper floor and a conversation he had with another staff member. But those points weren't discussed during the hearing. It seemed like the court had only focused on details that made Old Man Albert look suspicious. Sophia took careful notes and made copies of everything. She was getting ready to build a clear timeline that could prove something had been wrong since the beginning. She felt more confident that the truth was being buried on purpose. Back at the Langford house, Sophie kept thinking about the night the jewel disappeared. She had so many questions in her mind, and she felt that keeping them all inside was making her uncomfortable. One afternoon, while sitting in the living room with her grandmother, she finally asked a direct question. "Grandma, what really happened the night the ring was gone?" Beatrice didn't even look surprised. Instead, her expression changed immediately. She put her cup down and looked Sophie straight in the eyes. Her voice became cold. She told Sophie to stop asking questions about things she didn't understand. She said it was not her place to worry about adult matters. Sophie didn't say anything else. She just nodded and went to her room. But inside, she was scared. Not just because of Beatrice's tone, but because she remembered something from that night. She remembered seeing her grandmother near the hallway with something shiny in her hand. It had been late and no one else was around. Victor, meanwhile, was starting to feel more and more uneasy. He didn't want to give interviews, and he avoided journalists who asked about the case. He stayed away from public events and preferred to stay at home or in his office. People thought he was just quiet, but the truth was, he was deeply conflicted. He knew things didn't feel right. He started reviewing old files, watching past videos of the family, and trying to remember how things really were. But deep down, he had doubts. He remembered Old Man Albert's loyalty, his calm voice, the way he had helped raise Sophie after his wife passed away. Still, he hadn't spoken up. He had done nothing while the case moved forward, while Old Man Albert was attacked in public. He was beginning to regret his silence. At night, when he was alone, he sometimes looked at the court reports and tried to understand what was missing. But it was hard to admit he had made a mistake by not defending him. Sophia didn't stop her investigation. She started calling former employees who had worked at the Langford house. Some answered her calls but were nervous. One man said he couldn't talk about the past. A woman said she had moved on and didn't want problems. A few others hung up right away. Sophia understood their fear. Beatrice had power and people didn't want to be involved in something that could affect their lives. But one of them, a former gardener, agreed to meet briefly. He said he always thought the situation was strange and remembered seeing a car arrive late on the night the jewel disappeared. But no one had mentioned it. Sophia took notes and asked more questions, but he refused to say anything else. Sophia thanked him and kept trying. She believed that if she could find just one brave person willing to speak publicly, the case could take a different direction. For now, though, fear continued to control the people who could help. Sophie stayed quiet after the talk with her grandmother, but she couldn't forget what she saw that night. She remembered walking down the hallway and seeing Beatrice open the safe in her bedroom. Beatrice had something small and shiny in her hand. Sophie didn't understand what it was at the time, but now she believed it might have been the missing jewel. She also remembered Beatrice quickly closing the door when she realized Sophie was nearby. Since that night, Beatrice had been extra nice to her, buying her toys, promising vacations, and even saying she might get a pet. Sophie liked the gifts, but she also knew they came with a price.
Yes.
Every time she tried to talk about Old Man Albert, Beatrice changed the subject or warned her not to bring it up. Sophie was smart enough to understand that something wasn't right, but she didn't know who she could trust. She kept everything to herself and hoped one day someone would ask her the right question and really listen. One evening, while sitting alone in his office, Victor opened a folder with old family videos. He clicked on one file and saw a familiar scene. Old Man Albert sitting on the living room floor with Sophie, holding her close after a difficult day. It was from the time right after his wife's death. In the video, Old Man Albert was patient and calm, comforting Sophie with simple words and quiet support. Victor watched the entire video without saying a word. When it ended, he sat back in his chair and thought about everything. Old Man Albert had always been there. He had never asked for anything and had never failed the family. The more he thought, the more he realized how badly he had failed him. Still, he didn't know how to fix it. He had stayed silent for too long. But maybe it wasn't too late. At the same time, Sophia decided something important. She had seen enough errors, enough fear, and enough silence. It was time to confront the official story in court. She was ready to take the next step. During the court session, the room was quiet and focused. Lawyers were speaking in turns, and the judge was listening carefully. Old Man Albert sat in his seat with Sophia beside him, both waiting for the next part of the process. Suddenly, the back door of the courtroom opened with a small creak. People turned their heads, expecting maybe a clerk or someone from security, but instead Sophie stepped in. She was wearing a gray blazer that looked too big for her and was holding a folder pressed tightly against her chest. Her steps were quick and determined. The nanny who was supposed to be watching her was nowhere in sight. Everyone stared in confusion. Sophie walked past the rows of adults, reached the center of the room, lifted one hand and said, "Clearly, I'm my mommy's lawyer." A wave of surprise passed through the courtroom. Before anyone could react, Sophie ran to Old Man Albert, wrapped her arms around him, and whispered loud enough for the room to hear, "I saw Grandma hide the ring in the safe." For a few seconds, no one moved. The judge looked confused. Some people gasped, and Beatrice froze in her seat. A security officer approached Sophie, ready to escort her out. But before he could touch her, Victor stood up. His voice was firm but calm. He asked the judge to let his daughter speak. "She's not just playing," he said. "She remembers something important." The judge paused, looked at Sophie, then at Victor, and allowed her to continue. Sophie stood in front of the courtroom, holding her folder. She opened it and pulled out a drawing. It showed the layout of Beatrice's room, including the exact location of the safe. Sophie pointed to it and explained how she had seen Beatrice open the safe and place something shiny inside. Then she looked at the judge and repeated what she had heard that night. Old Man Albert will be an easy target. The room was no longer quiet. People started whispering. The judge raised his hand and ordered silence. The judge took a moment before speaking. He said the hearing would be paused and that a full investigation into Sophie's statement would begin immediately. He seemed surprised, but he didn't ignore what was said. Beatrice stood up, clearly shaken, and tried to explain. She claimed that Sophie was just a child with an active imagination. She said the girl must have misunderstood something or created a story based on things she heard from adults. But her voice trembled slightly, and her confidence didn't seem as strong as before. She avoided looking at Sophie and kept glancing nervously toward her lawyer. The people in the courtroom could see that something had changed. The mood had shifted. What had started as a one-sided case now felt very different. Sophia stood up and formally requested an immediate search of Beatrice's home and office. The judge approved it. Officers were called in to carry out the order. Everyone waited, unsure of what would be discovered next. Old man Albert remained seated, stunned by what had just happened. He gently held Sophie's hand, still processing everything. For so long, he had felt alone, with no one willing to speak for him. Now a little girl had changed everything with just a few words. Sophia turned to Old Man Albert and quietly said that this could change the outcome of the entire trial. Old Man Albert nodded, holding back tears. Meanwhile, Beatrice sat stiffly in her chair, barely moving. She didn't speak again. Victor looked at his daughter with a mix of pride and guilt. He had stayed quiet for too long, but now he understood what he should have seen earlier. Sophie had been carrying this truth inside her, waiting for the right moment to speak. The judge reminded everyone that further steps would be taken soon. Court officers left the room to begin the investigation. People in the courtroom whispered and shared glances. The story was no longer simple. Sophie's voice had shifted the case into something new. Outside the courtroom, reporters were already gathering. News of the interruption had spread fast. Cameras were waiting at the entrance. Inside, the judge ended the session early, explaining that more hearings would follow once the new evidence was reviewed. Old Man Albert was told he could go home for now. As he stood up, Sophie stayed close to his side. Sophia gathered their things and helped guide them outside. Victor followed slowly. He didn't say much, but he stayed near his daughter. Beatrice, on the other hand, left through a side door with her lawyer. Her face was tight with anger and concern. She didn't speak to anyone. Officers would be visiting her house soon, and everyone knew it. Old Man Albert felt overwhelmed, but for the first time, he wasn't afraid. Sophia told him that now they had something real, something solid. The words of a child might seem small to some, but in this case, they had revealed a hidden part of the truth. Everyone could feel the change had started. Later that evening, Sophia sat in her apartment reviewing her notes again. She had recorded every part of Sophie's statement and had already made a list of follow-up steps. Her phone kept buzzing with messages from people asking about the case. For now, she ignored them. She wanted to focus. Old Man Albert had called her a few minutes earlier just to say thank you again. Sophia told him the fight wasn't over, but things were finally going in the right direction. Meanwhile, Old Man Albert was at home with Sophie, both of them sitting on the couch. Sophie had changed out of the blazer and was back in her regular clothes, but she still had the folder nearby. Old Man Albert hugged her close and said how proud he was. Sophie didn't say much. She was tired but calm. Across town, Beatrice's house was being searched by court officers. And in the courtroom, the judge had already ordered that new evidence be presented as soon as possible. Sophie's brave moment had truly changed the direction of the trial. Victor could no longer hold back the questions building inside him. After what happened in the courtroom with Sophie's unexpected appearance and bold testimony, he knew the time had come to confront his mother. That same evening, he walked into Beatrice's private sitting room and asked her directly, "Where's the ring?" Beatrice, sitting on the couch with a drink in her hand, didn't answer at first. Victor repeated the question louder this time. He told her he had stayed silent long enough, and that he wanted the truth. She looked at him carefully, then sighed and set the glass down. With a tired expression, she admitted that she had hidden the jewel. She said it had never been about stealing, but about fear. Beatrice confessed that she was afraid of losing her role in the family, especially after seeing how close Old Man Albert and Sophie had become. She said she had only wanted to scare Old Man Albert, make him step away from the family, but things got out of control faster than she expected. Victor was stunned. He couldn't believe that everything Old Man Albert had gone through was caused by his own mother's jealousy. He asked Beatrice where the jewel was now. At first, she refused to answer, but Victor didn't give up. He searched her room himself. After looking behind bookshelves and drawers, he found a small safe hidden behind a false panel in the wall. He had never noticed it before. Beatrice tried to stop him, but he opened it. Inside, there was the missing ring, along with several other valuable items that had been reported missing over the years. Victor took everything and put them into a secure bag. Without saying another word to Beatrice, he left the house and drove straight to the nearest police station. There he handed over the ring and the rest of the contents from the safe. Officers took photos, filed reports, and thanked him for coming forward. It was official now. The truth could no longer be hidden. What old man Albert had said all along was finally confirmed. News of the discovery spread quickly. Within hours, local news outlets were reporting that the missing family jewel had been found and that it had been hidden in the Langford house all along. Reporters stood outside the courthouse repeating updates and trying to get reactions from anyone involved. Photos of the recovered items were shared online. Social media started to change its tone. People who had once judged old man Albert harshly were now asking questions about how the case was handled. Some even posted apologies admitting they had believed the wrong story. Sophia acted fast. She prepared the official documents and filed the new evidence with the court. In the next hearing, she presented the photos of the safe, the jewel, and the statement from Victor confirming what had happened. She spoke clearly, showing how the case had been built on lies, and how old man Albert had been treated unfairly from the start. The courtroom was full again, but this time the energy was different. People were now paying close attention. Old man Albert took the stand once more, but this time he wasn't there as a suspect. He was calm and steady as he explained everything again. From his years of service to the moment he was accused and removed from the house, he talked about the pain of being abandoned by the people he had worked so hard for and how much it had hurt to be seen as guilty without proof. This time, the judge listened closely, took notes, looked at the evidence again, and then addressed the courtroom. He admitted there had been serious errors in how the case had been handled, said the accusations were made without proper investigation, and that old man Albert had suffered greatly because of it. Then with a firm voice, he declared that old man Albert was innocent. The room remained quiet for a moment, and then Sophie stood up from her seat, ran across the room, and hugged old man Albert tightly. Old man Albert held her close, crying softly while the press quickly captured the emotional moment. Flashes from cameras filled the room as reporters took photos of old man Albert and Sophie embracing. Journalists scribbled down every detail. News channels quickly broadcasted the judge's statement, showing video clips of old man Albert's emotional moment and repeating Sophie's earlier testimony. The public, watching from their homes and phones, began to react. Comments flooded online platforms supporting old man Albert and criticizing the way he had been treated. People started questioning how such a case had been allowed to go that far without real proof. Sophia, standing by old man Albert's side, gave a brief statement to the press, saying they were glad. Justice had finally been served, but that it had come far too late. Beatrice, who had always controlled the narrative, was now being investigated. The same cameras that once followed her as a respected figure now showed her avoiding questions, looking tired and defeated. Investigators were assigned to look into how the case was handled and whether there were other people who had helped. As the courtroom emptied, old man Albert walked out slowly. This time, people didn't avoid him. They looked at him with respect and even admiration. Some reporters asked questions, but they were more careful, no longer treating him like a criminal. Old man Albert didn't say much. He held Sophie's hand and walked past the crowd with his head held high. For the first time since the nightmare began, he was not seen as the person who had done something wrong. He was seen as someone who had survived something unfair and still kept his dignity. Victor stood nearby, watching them leave. He didn't approach, but his eyes showed regret. Old man Albert noticed him and gave a small nod. It was enough for now. Sophia caught up and told old man Albert she would help with anything that came next. Old man Albert smiled. They had more work ahead. But for now, he had his freedom back. And as he stepped outside the courthouse, he wasn't just leaving a building. He was finally walking away from the shadow of blame. After everything that had happened, many people expected old man Albert to take advantage of the situation. He received several job offers from people who had once turned their backs on him. Others offered money, saying it was a way to make up for the damage done. Some companies tried to use his story to gain positive publicity, suggesting public roles or sponsorships, but old man Albert said no to all of it. When reporters asked what he planned to do next, his answer was always the same. I just want to live in peace. He didn't want fame, attention, or revenge. He wanted to rebuild his life quietly, without being seen as a symbol or a victim. He went back to his small apartment, cleaned it up, and started organizing his old things. He spent more time with Sophie now that visits were more frequent and relaxed. Old Man Albert focused on simple things: cooking, walking in the park, and spending time alone. He was finally free, and that freedom mattered more than anything else. Not long after, Victor held a press conference, the first time he spoke openly about what had happened. He apologized directly to Old Man Albert, both publicly and privately. He said he had made a terrible mistake by staying silent and that he deeply regretted not believing him when it mattered. The media broadcasted his words, and people listened. But Victor didn't stop there. He announced the creation of a foundation dedicated to helping men who had been wrongfully accused or mistreated in legal systems. He wanted to use the family's resources for something good. During the announcement, he invited Old Man Albert to lead the organization as its first director. At first, Old Man Albert hesitated. He had wanted a quiet life away from attention. But after some thought, he realized that this was a way to help others who had suffered like he had. It wasn't about being in the spotlight. It was about doing something meaningful. He accepted the role, and Victor promised to support him every step of the way. Sophia, who had stayed by Old Man Albert's side since the early days of the case, remained involved as well. She became the foundation's legal advisor and helped design its core mission. Together, she and Old Man Albert built a plan focused on legal aid, emotional support, and public awareness. Sophia was proud to be part of the work, and Old Man Albert trusted her completely. They hired a small but dedicated team and started holding weekly meetings. Old Man Albert took his role seriously. He didn't want the foundation to be a symbolic gesture. He wanted it to actually help people. Meanwhile, Beatrice was going through her own legal troubles. After a full investigation, she was found guilty of false accusations and hiding evidence. She received a sentence of house arrest, and the court removed her legal authority over the family's finances and decisions. She was no longer in control. Her public image collapsed, and people no longer praised her as they once had. She spent most of her days isolated, far from the spotlight she once enjoyed. Victor began managing the family's businesses with a new approach. He changed the structure of the company to make it more transparent and fair. He replaced several longtime board members who had been close to Beatrice and brought in younger, more diverse voices. He also set up a policy to support employees who faced unfair treatment. Victor admitted his past silence had hurt many people, and he promised to be different. At home, things also changed. He spent more time with Sophie and started listening to her more carefully. He encouraged her to speak freely and be honest. Sophie, in turn, spent a lot of time with Old Man Albert. The two were closer than ever. Old Man Albert would pick her up from school, help her with homework, and even attend school events. They laughed more and talked openly. For Sophie, Old Man Albert had always been a source of comfort. Now, he was also an important part of her everyday life again. The wounds of the past were slowly healing through new routines and trust. The foundation officially launched a few months later. They opened a modest office downtown and announced their first campaign to support men wrongfully accused in low-income communities. Old Man Albert organized the first few events personally. He made sure the team understood that the mission was not just about public image. It was about listening to real stories, offering real support, and pushing for legal reforms. He met with men who had gone through similar situations and invited experts to give talks. He also worked with community groups to spread awareness. Sophia helped train volunteers, reviewed legal files, and made sure that each case received proper attention. Old Man Albert spent long hours at the office, but didn't complain. He was building something that mattered. The press began to shift their coverage. They no longer introduced Old Man Albert as the man falsely accused of theft. Now they called him the founder of a growing movement. His name, once connected to scandal, now stood for dignity, strength, and justice. Old Man Albert's life had changed completely, but not in the way people expected. He didn't become rich or famous. He didn't spend his days giving interviews or attending big events. Instead, he focused on meaningful work, real connections, and his own peace of mind. The foundation grew slowly but steadily, and Old Man Albert was always present, guiding every decision. He still lived in the same apartment, still cooked his own meals, and still took long walks to clear his thoughts. But now, when people passed him on the street, they nodded respectfully or stopped to thank him. Children smiled at him. Former neighbors who once avoided him now spoke with warmth. Old Man Albert had rebuilt his life, not through revenge, but through purpose. He didn't carry anger anymore. He carried experience and a strong will to make sure no one else would go through what he had. For the first time in a long time, Old Man Albert wasn't afraid of what came next. He had freedom. He had respect. And above all, he had his life back. Finally, we've reached the end of this story. I'm extremely happy that you've made it this far. Thank you very much for watching. Comment below what you thought and what was the best or worst part. Don't forget to subscribe.